The morning seemed like any other morning. A mouth-watering breakfast was cooking on the stove. The aroma of food filled the kitchen, and the girl kept adding vegetables to the dish, which already looked delicious. Suddenly, he glanced at the clock and realized it was almost 0 and his father was still asleep. For that reason, she immediately stopped what she was doing in the kitchen. Then she went to her room. She climbed onto the bed, tried to shake her father awake, and told him it was time to get up. But there was no reaction at all. The girl began shaking him harder, realizing it might be too late. And only when she called out "Dad" did the young man wake up instantly. He sat up and looked a little surprised. After staring at the little girl in front of him, the young man finally composed himself and smiled. The girl smiled back and told her father to get up and have breakfast. 2 months ago, due to his father's contract, this young man suddenly found himself with a daughter. 10 years ago, a rift appeared on Earth and disrupted its harmony and peace. Very few people realize what is actually happening. People are overcome with fear and try to flee from the flashes of bright light while seeking shelter from that reef. Monsters began to appear in unimaginable numbers, far beyond the ability of ordinary humans to fight them. However, in some people regardless of gender or age, strange abilities actually emerged. They call themselves hunters and fight the creatures emerging from the rift without hesitation. Each individual can view and manage their abilities through a status window that closely resembles a game interface. Through that interface, everyone can control the amount of power they have. After making sure they have enough power, the hunters will try to attack repeatedly. However, MC did not have that kind of ability. After completing his mandatory military service, he spent 3 years studying in peace. The young man then managed to land a job at an agency as a technical staff member in the Rift department. At that workplace, he was the youngest employee among his colleagues. The MC wasn't known for any special talents, nor was he an outstanding worker. But after a year of hard work, he finally landed his first assignment. The young man was filled with hope for the first serious job of his life. After work, MC went to the Gangdung area to scout out a new riff. Because he wasn't paying attention on the road, he was hit by a truck partway there. However, the young man did not lose his life. When he opened his eyes, there wasn't a single scratch on his body. The place where MC regained consciousness was a world called Murim. Battles, training exercises, and fights were taking place everywhere. It was a terrifying situation for an ordinary office worker. As time went on, the fear didn't go away. Because in the spirit world, the young man experienced death over and over again. Every time he died, he was always reborn. This happened because, after waking up in this world, he finally acquired a certain ability. He can use a pocket watch that takes him back 24 hours into the past every time he dies. Thanks to this ability, the young man keeps returning only to die again at the hands of the ruthless soldiers. At one point, the MC even lost his sense of self. However, he eventually grew to become the strongest figure in the Murim world. The people of Murim dubbed him the Heavenly Demon. Even though he had become the strongest, the MC kept thinking of ways to return. The MC was the first to succeed and received a reward in the form of a sudden return to his original reality. When he woke up in the hospital and felt fine, MC got up and walked toward the exit. A nurse called out to him, telling him to come back immediately if he felt any pain. Seeing the man who looked healthy, the doctors were very surprised because the person standing before them was the same patient who had undergone a 17-hour surgery following an accident the day before. As he walked around the city, the MC realized that his memories of Korea weren't very clear. If he wanted to readjust, it would clearly take some time. As he became familiar with his personal status window, the MC realized that his power had grown so great that he no longer needed to work. The young man realized that both his hands were drenched in blood. A series of repeated betrayals had led him to a point where he no longer trusted anyone. For no apparent reason, the decision to return to the office was made on the spot. There, his coworkers immediately turned to look at him in surprise. Everyone asked if he was okay. The young man replied that nothing seemed to be wrong with his body. From the outside, there were indeed no noticeable changes. However, his coworkers began to notice that the MC's way of speaking sounded different. The young man's physique also looked much stronger, even though he had previously been known as frail and timid. His boss approached him and remarked that even the MC seemed to have grown taller. The MC replied that the changes he had undergone were understandable. However, he emphasized that the person standing before them was still Dojun, not someone else. Then he asked where his desk was because he was still in shock from the earlier accident. That situation had left his memory in disarray. That explanation actually made the situation seem even more suspicious, as if someone else had come to take his place. The supervisor asked the young man to admit where the real MC had gone. Only one female employee recognized him. The female employee added that the MC now looks more handsome. However, her boss, in a mocking tone, asked Hanwo to bring a fingerprint scanner. The employee immediately brought the device in question. The procedure requires placing the right thumb on the scanner. Only after the machine confirms the identity can everyone be assured. The employees were surprised when the identity of the MC from the Rift department was finally confirmed. The department had repeated the same procedure several times. However, every examination result still pointed to the same conclusion. It was hard to believe that such a drastic change could occur in just 24 hours. The girl said that the condition was most likely amnesia. He also mentioned that the MC's delivery now sounds more polished. His boss responded by saying that the delivery does sound good, but the change in height still seems implausible. The MC was getting tired of all the checks and the constant uncertainty. The commotion was starting to give him a headache. For that reason, the MC simply asked to be shown where his workplace was. However, my immediate supervisor said that I should use that day to go home and get some good rest. MC is still on sick leave. He won't be allowed to return to work until the next day. Although MC said he could make the trip home on his own, the department head insisted on driving him. The MC walked around the streets for quite a while. Finally, a house looked familiar, and the MC realized that was where he lived. As he climbed the stairs, the memory of which floor his apartment was on didn't immediately come to mind. Many small details had slipped his mind. He couldn't remember the apartment's access code either. For a moment, the MC stood silent, trying to recall it as he randomly pressed a few combinations. Suddenly, a voice came from behind the door, asking, "Who's out there?" A young girl opened the door and looked at the MC. The girl said that her uncle had finally arrived. However, the young man didn't understand who she was or why she was in his apartment. After a brief heart-to-heart conversation, they sat in the kitchen and drank tea. Dojun realized that the girl sitting across from him was his older brother's girlfriend's daughter. Since his older sister's boyfriend had died in an accident and the girl had nowhere to go, the young man agreed to take care of her. So he gave her the code to his apartment, and she came over today. That's what the girl confirmed. Dojun asked, "Have they met before?" because he sensed something strange. The girl replied that today was the first time they had met. Holding his head, Dojun then asked, "Does that girl have any other relatives?" Unfortunately, however, there was no one who could take care of her because her mother was an orphan. Seeing the delicious dish on the table, his attention was diverted from the main topic of conversation. He asked, "What is that?" "That's omor, a Korean dish consisting of an omelet stuffed with rice. The girl made it for her uncle to eat after he got home from work." Without saying thank you, Dojun went back to discussing important matters. He said he couldn't take the girl in. After he said that, the girl became very angry. She didn't understand why the young man had broken his promise. As proof, the girl showed a text message on her cell phone from 2 days ago. It said that it would be easy for him to be welcomed into her home. Dojun realized that he was the one who wrote the message. He said that as of yesterday he was still in the hospital and had just been discharged today. Because he had lost his memory, the young man couldn't recall many details of his life. The girl asked, "Is he all right?" Dojun replied that although his body had fully recovered, his memory was very poor. This causes difficulties in her daily life. For this reason, it seems it will be difficult for her to take care of someone. It took her some time to adjust to everyday life. For a few seconds, the girl didn't know what to say. But then she suggested they negotiate and draw up a contract. Her suggestion sounded crazy and strange. She asked Dojun to be her father but only until she graduated from school. She said that since Dojun had lost his memory, it would be very difficult for him to live on his own. Cleaning the house, doing laundry, cooking. All of that is hard to do on her own, so she offered to help in return. She just wants to stay here until she graduates from school. She asked to stay with Dojun for at least 6 months until she moved into the dorm. She looked at Dojun with eyes as pleading as a puppy's. so he couldn't refuse. His emotions subsided. After giving it careful thought, the young man realized that it wasn't a bad condition. In fact, it was a very good one. Dojun thought that since he had been living in the Middle Ages for so long, it takes time for him to adapt to the modern world. Besides, he can always ask her about things he doesn't know or ask for help. It was beneficial for both of them, and the young man agreed to sign the contract. The girl was very curious about the contract and watched Dojun closely. He took a piece of paper and a pen out of his briefcase. The young man sat down at the table and began writing something. When he finished writing, he handed it to the girl. He added that if anything was unclear or needed to be corrected, she should let him know right away. According to the contract, Seo Yoonhee is required to do all the homework. He must also prepare a report on his allowance and other expenses. Meanwhile, Dojun is responsible for providing the necessary funds for all of these items. The girl agreed right away. Don asked if there was anything that needed to be corrected. Seoyeon replied that there were no problems and everything was fine, as he handed the pen to the girl. Dojun, looking relaxed, asked him to sign the contract. He signed it. The young man added that he hoped they could get along. Yoonhee confirmed that she would do her best. She smiled and asked, in that case, can she call him Dad? Dojun replied that she could do as she pleased. The girl asked to be addressed by her first name only and to simply be called Yoonhee. Glancing into the room, the girl wanted to make her first request to her new father. However, she didn't immediately realize that Dojun was changing clothes. She felt very embarrassed. She turned away and apologized. For a moment, she forgot what she had wanted to ask. Then he said he had to go grocery shopping because the fridge was empty. Dojun took a bank card out of his wallet. He handed it to Yoonhee and told her to use the card to pay for everything. At first, the girl was a little shy, but she eventually accepted the card. Then he thought that since his father had lost his memory, maybe he could remember something if he went to the nearest store with him. That made sense. So Dojun said they should go together. Then the two of them went to the store together. When they arrived at the store, the girl decided that, for the time being, her father needed to eat meals with fresh vegetables. But at that moment, Dojun was only thinking about the pork belly that was on sale. Even so, he didn't mention it and simply agreed to Yoonhee's suggestion. Suddenly, something started happening inside the store behind them. When they turned around, they both saw another rift. The rift quickly began pulling everyone around it in. However, Yoonhee didn't panic. She pulled a weapon from her pocket. She told her father to hide because the situation was too dangerous. A goblin emerged from the rift. The creature began to scream loudly, terrifying all the visitors. People started running as fast as they could, paying no attention to what was in front of them. The girl didn't hesitate for a moment. Without a second thought, she fired at the hideous creature. Dojun just stood calmly beside the shopping bag and watched. Yoonhee hit her target. The goblin screamed in anger and pain. A moment later, the monster was lying unconscious on the floor with a hole in its chest. People gathered around to check if the creature was truly dead. They were relieved to see a hunter nearby. The girl sat down on a bench and let out a sigh. Meanwhile, Dojun was trying to process the news that his new daughter was a hunter. Yoonhee quickly hid her weapon in her bag. She was annoyed that her father hadn't hidden, as she'd asked him to. He said his father could have been hurt. Dojun didn't deny it. He just promised to be more careful from now on. A police officer arrived at the scene. He examined the creature and filed a report. Then he approached Dojun and asked, "Was it that young man who killed the goblin?" Dojun replied that it wasn't him. He said his daughter had done it herself. The police officer was very surprised. He asked for her ID, phone number, address, and bank account number. All of that is necessary to transfer the reward. The man explained that it was a reward for killing goblins and the cost of the magic stone. The police will pay the reward for keeping the citizens alive and safe. The police officer said that her father could provide her with a bank account. However, Dojun told Yoonhee to give him her own account number. He said it was Yoonhee's doing. The girl was very pleased and happy. She felt her father had shown her respect by doing that. When she got home, Yooni was in the kitchen. Suddenly, he heard the sound of an incoming message. When he looked at his phone, he was surprised. It turned out to be a money transfer from the Seoul Metropolitan Police Department. The amount was Rp150, 50,000 rupiah for Rifi's destruction, plus 100,000 rupiah in compensation. The amount was so large that Yooni fell silent for a moment. Dojun said that if they were paying that much just for one goblin, so there was no point in the girl staying with him. But Yooni replied that it was just a matter of luck. The chance of a rift appearing is random. Furthermore, there is no guarantee that all monsters will be as easy to defeat as goblins. He said that only licensed hunters or those with the party are allowed to enter the rift, which is referred to as a dungeon. And for now, Yun is just an ordinary person. Dojun suddenly asked if the girl had studied cultivation techniques. He asked what that meant. The young man explained that the law involved absorbing natural energy. Yoon said that his father might be very surprised to learn that he was a hunter. He plans to enroll in the National Hunter Academy in March. He hasn't undergone his awakening yet. However, he can use mana temporarily. She also said that he already had a permit to carry a pistol. That's why she always carried it with him. His father praised him, saying that not everyone can be a hunter. Her daughter added that she should be treated well. Yooni is absolutely convinced that she will become very famous in no time. After preparing a lot of food, he told Dojun to finish it all. He told him not to leave anything behind. Then, out of the blue, he asked what Dojun did for a living. Dojun replied that he worked at City Hall. Yoon was relieved that her father was just an office worker. She was glad that his job wasn't dangerous, though she still felt worried. Yoon smiled. She brought the plate closer to him. She said, "Enjoy your meal," while calling him Dad. Morning arrived. Dojun walked to work and entered the office. The department head was surprised to see the young man. He asked, "Is Dojun able to work yet?" Dojun thanked him for his concern. He replied that he was fine. The man smiled. He said that if it felt too hard, Don should ask for help. He added that health is the most important thing. His coworkers showed him around his workplace again. He did that whenever he forgot where his desk was. The man sitting next to him said that if Dojun couldn't remember something, he could ask. He added that he was a senior at the dojo. His name was Kon Huk-soo. The young man thanked him for his attention and concern. Finally, he sat down at his desk. The department head glanced at his watch and said that it was time and that someone was clearly on their way. The young man explained that this was a very valuable hunter and asked him to be patient for a moment. The department head was a little puzzled as to why an F-rank hunter was considered valuable. However, Huk-soo replied that in a situation like this, every hunter was valuable. No sooner had he said that than the office door opened and the girl they had been waiting for so long finally walked in. It was clear that she was in a great hurry. Out of breath, she apologized for being late. The department head immediately approached her, saying he needed to speak with her. He told Dojun to say hello and explained that the girl was their new hunter. The young man didn't fully understand his task, and Huk-soo could tell from his expression. Then Huk-soo took Dojun by the hand and led him over to the girl to explain the situation. He told Dojun that their department was primarily responsible for tracking down Rif. Usually, each employee would go out on a mission paired with a hunter. After introducing the girl, Huk-soo said her name was Cha Yi-ji. He explained that Cha Yi-ji would be under Dojun's supervision or, more precisely, that's what her superior should have said. The two of them looked at him, not understanding what he meant. Huk-soo, too, grew a little nervous and fell silent for a moment. He explained that Dojun was currently not in a condition to go on a mission. That's why he said he would take over the case. The young man asked if that was really his job. Huk-soo confirmed it but said he'd rather handle it himself. Although Dojun seemed fine, Huk-soo was worried that the previous accident might have had an impact. The department head agreed and suggested that Dojun might have suffered a head injury. The question is, can he work normally? The young man wondered what was really going on. To him, it seemed as though his coworkers viewed him as an unreliable employee. That is why Dojun said with confidence that he would take on the task himself. However, Huk-soo didn't seem interested and began trying to change his mind. The department head was also angry with the young man and wanted him to take a break. He pointed out that Dojun couldn't even find his own workplace. In addition, Hunter has already received official notification that it would be better if Huxu worked with him. Sitting outside the store, the department head scolded Huxu for letting Dojun go on a mission. Everyone knew what he was capable of. Huxu understood the department head's concerns. However, he wanted to give Dojun one more chance because he was still their employee. Although the department head was unhappy, he said nothing and eventually agreed to the decision. Meanwhile, Dojun and the hunter were heading toward the rift. The young man was studying the documents his superior had given him. He realized that he had enough information. In no time at all, after reading it a few times, he understood what he had to do. His task was to study all the information about the rift. Support from the Hunter Academy had been allocated for this work. However, many forged documents began circulating among the major guilds. This started to cause problems. Even the government began using them. Suddenly, Dojun came across information about a 21-year-old female hunter. He apologized for it, but the girl replied that it was okay. Noticing the object Kaieji was holding in her hand, Dojun asked, "What is that?" She replied that it was a suitcase containing her uniform and weapons. That suitcase was essential gear for fighting monsters. Their conversation came to a halt when the taxi driver braked suddenly. He told them they had arrived. Dojun and Kaieji got out of the car and looked around. The girl quickly pulled a strange green orb out of her bag. She pressed it against her body. The orb glowed very brightly. A moment later, a flash of light appeared. In just a second, she was standing right there. Hunter Kaieji was now wearing his special outfit. The sight caught Dojun's attention. Dojun liked what he saw. Hunter smiled when he realized this was the first time the young man had seen something like that. Chei said that the armor was the lowest level of defense. However, it cost her 3 million, which was quite expensive for him. Then Dojun asked about his sword. He replied that the sword from the skeleton warrior Ren wasn't too expensive. Suddenly, he stopped and looked at his partner. He asked what he should call him. Dojun replied that he didn't mind being called anything. Finally, he decided to call him manager. Since Dojun was responsible for Riff, they were checked by special officers at the entrance to the site. The check went very quickly, and they were allowed to enter. The place was very colorful and beautiful. It took them a while to walk there before they reached their destination. When they arrived in front of the cave, they both stopped and examined every detail of it. Chei looked up with a sad expression. This was the first time she had ever been in a place like this all by herself. When he turned around, he saw another hunter standing behind him. The man said it had been a long time since they'd last met. He thought Keiji was no longer a hunter. It was a man he didn't want to see. He also didn't expect to run into her here. The hunter asked if she had joined a guild. The question struck him as odd because he knew that Sieji wasn't yet able to channel manhwa properly. Chayeji bowed her head. Whether it was because of those words or because she was standing in front of the manager, she felt embarrassed. The hunter snorted and mocked her. He remarked on how amazing it was that Saiji had managed to survive this long. Dojun couldn't bear to watch. I asked, "Does Kaieji know him?" The girl replied that they had been classmates at the academy while training to become hunters. The hunter looked at Dojun. When he saw his badge, he burst out laughing. He laughed at the fact that it was now clear why a girl like that wouldn't be accepted into any guild. He said that no guild would be willing to accept Chayeji. She was most likely just an F-rank. His laughter grew louder. Then Dojun said that was enough. It was a sad sight. The hunter didn't take Dojun's warning seriously. He kept making silly jokes at the two of them. Just as he was still laughing, he suddenly glared at Dojun with anger. As he berated the young man, he grabbed Dojun by the neck and lifted him up. The hunter gritted his teeth. He asked, would a civil servant dare to stop him if he suddenly took a dislike to something? At that moment, Dojun's expression changed. His eyes turned red. It was clear that he was no ordinary man. Suddenly, Hunter felt terrified. He didn't understand what was happening. The place was the same, but everything felt different. A voice in his head told him that if he let the civil servant go within 3 seconds, he would be forgiven. Everything around him changed. The sky grew dark. It was as if night had fallen in broad daylight. Hunter began to choke. He felt nauseous and couldn't breathe. One of his friends asked Hanjong what was happening to him. However, Hunter collapsed as if under some kind of spell. He didn't react to anything. All his friends panicked and tried to snap him out of it. Well, Hanjong, When they saw that Hunter had wet himself, they thought he'd eaten something wrong. Kahieji was very surprised. He couldn't imagine that a man who looked so strong could be that weak. Dojun reached out his hand toward Na Hanjung. He tried to help her to her feet. Hunter was startled again when he saw Dojun's eyes glowing like two red embers. In his mind, Dojun told Na Hanjung that if she valued her life, she had to get out of the way. Hunter was screaming like a madman. He said he would obey and follow orders. The people around him were embarrassed by their friend's behavior. They closed their eyes so they wouldn't have to witness the scene. Dojun turned to Chai Yijai. He said it was time to leave before they saw something even worse. They hurried toward the rift. The manager went in first. Chai followed him. Before long, they found themselves on a beautiful green plain. Looking around, the heroes realized that this rift was an F-rank. Inside, everything was fairly simple. As for terrifying creatures and monsters, they saw only goblins roaming the hills. Dojun took his work tablet out of his bag. He logged into the rift management system. He registered the rift with the address, Seoul City, Gangdong District, the area around Myeongul 2. He selected rank F when setting a higher rank. An exception item must be selected. The mapping process was successfully completed. Dojun was overjoyed. Now it was safe to leave that place. Chaji said he would lead the way. The girl was very curious. She loved exploring everything. Kaiji knew that even though she had previously been just a porter, she was still responsible for the safety of the general public. Besides, if she showed the manager her good side, she would surely be considered better than a hired hunter. Suddenly, they heard a lot of noise behind them. They immediately turned around sharply. Tim saw several hunters slaughtering the goblins one by one. Dojun realized that many hunters had already arrived before them. The girl was very upset because she had wanted to show the manager something. Dojun, on the other hand, was happy because there were no goblins left, so he could quickly draw a map and finish his work. Dojun decided to open the information window and examine CYJ's hunter stats. However, he was surprised to see such ordinary stats. Still, the girl's skills such as her swordsmanship rank caught his attention. He asked, "Is that true?" Chei was pleased that the manager was interested in her. She confirmed that the information was correct. At first, she was very happy because there weren't many S-rank skills like that. When she first started training, she was always number 1 at the academy. Chei always got excellent test scores and never lost a competition. Back then, she truly believed she was the best. Things started to get worse when the students began showing off their abilities. He didn't even have any mana, and there was nothing he could do. After saying that, Saiji burst into tears. He said that mana only appears at the 3rd level, and he didn't even know how to reach the 2nd level. He had already tried his hardest. However, she began to think that all her efforts would end in failure. The girl was so panicked and lost in her thoughts that she didn't even realize she'd been shot at. Dojun pulled her aside just in time. The first shot was followed by a second. Only then did the girl almost fully come to her senses. When they saw a mace fall near them, they realized a fight was about to break out. She gripped her sword and quickly charged toward the goblins. The goblins ran toward her. Although she was still inexperienced, Chaji was very skilled. She managed to dodge the goblin's first attack. Hunter leapt high into the air and struck the goblin in the face. Just as the goblin was regaining consciousness, the girl kicked it in the head. Kaiji had never been this excited. She had easily defeated the goblin. She wanted the manager to see everything, but when she turned around, she saw that Dojun was just staring at his tablet. Meanwhile, another goblin was moving toward her. The girl was terrified at the thought of the manager. She had thought the manager was just an ordinary office worker. He shouted just as the goblin was about to close in. The monster immediately swung its attack at Dojun, but Dojun wasn't fazed in the least. Chei was stunned to see how that seemingly ordinary manager handled the goblin so calmly. Dojun didn't even blink. He kept his eyes on his tablet while the monster was knocked back and screamed loudly. Goblin tersabitjadika during dari tebing. Ya tidak mengerti apa yang salah dengan manager ini. Ya juga tidak mengerti mengapa manager itu begitu kuat. Tanpa mengalahkan pandangan dari belakangnya, don memberitahu Chei bahwa pertarungan masih berlangsung. Ia mengatakan bahwa CGI harus fokus pada musuh. Chei focused her attention and turned around. She saw another goblin rampaging. Chei looked awkward at that moment. She accidentally swung her sword in the wrong direction. However, the girl kept fighting. She wanted to impress the manager with her actions. The hunter was completely exhausted. Dojun noticed this and asked if she had already run out of energy just from fighting to goblins. Chei replied that he was still strong, but it wasn't very obvious. His movements had become slower and weren't as fluid as before. The goblin smiled happily, feeling satisfied that he'd hit his target. This made CYJ extremely angry. He wanted to wipe that ugly smile off the creature's face, so he gripped his sword tightly. He charged toward his opponent. The manager, though he didn't show it, was watching the fight very closely. He concluded that swordsmanship was clearly not a skill for aggressive attacks. Dojun said that the most important thing was to parry an attack and then counter with as little force as possible. First, he advised Sieji to step back a little. He also told her to take a breath. He said the girl was having trouble breathing. That was why her sword was trembling. The hunter replied that he understood his task. He took 2 steps back from the goblin to catch his breath. The most important thing now was to focus on the enemy. Because the goblin was also at its limit, Chei noticed that the goblin was breathing heavily. The goblin didn't realize that its strength was nearly gone. Dojun suggested that he focus on his attack. He was sure there would be a good opportunity. The best approach was to gather all his strength and then launch a powerful counterattack. But what Dojun considered most important was capitalizing on his opponent's excessive movements. Chei took an active stance and waited. Then the manager gave the order. He said that now was the time to demonstrate the essence of swordsmanship. Those words inspired the hunter. His eyes sparkled. Ya menyadari bawa ia tidak boleh menjuswakan manajernya. Ini adalah pertarungan penentuan. Bukan hanya hunter itu yang menyadarinya. Goblin itu juga menyadarinya. Namun, betapa terkejutnya goblin itu. Chei tidak hanya berhasil menghindari serangan. Ia juga membalikan keadaan menjadi keuntungannya. Saat pedang menyentuh leher goblin, gadis itu berserak. Goblin itu sangat ketakutan. He realized he couldn't let his manager down. This was a decisive battle. It wasn't just Hunter who realized this, the goblin did too, but the goblin was in for a shock. Chei not only managed to dodge the attack, but she also turned the tables to her advantage. As the sword touched the goblin's neck, the girl cheered. The goblin was terrified. In a single move, she killed her enemy. Finally, she breathed a sigh of relief. Keiji was happy because this time she had been able to showcase the beauty of swordsmanship. The manager praised her. He said that she had made exploring the rift much easier. He also said that it was time to head back. The hunter lay down. He couldn't move because he was exhausted. He said he needed a little time before he could return. Dojun concluded that Hunter had killed 17 goblins that day. If he worked alone, he could make a lot of money. However, Kyeji replied that it wasn't just about the money. He just wanted to be part of a team. Smiling, the girl looked at the manager. She said she realized Dojun was hiding his power. Dojun looked a little confused, as if he didn't know what she was talking about. But Kyeji knew this was very strange. The manager knew a lot about swordsmanship. He had almost defeated the goblin with just his mind. Without listening to everything the girl had to say, Dojun said he was leaving. He immediately jumped into the rift hole. For a few moments, the girl was alone. She realized that something was clearly wrong. Back in town, Dojun walked down the dark streets toward his home. He was being watched closely by someone from around the corner. He immediately sensed he was being watched. He stopped abruptly as he realized who it was. Not understanding the purpose of being watched, the manager gave him 10 seconds to leave. He promised he wouldn't get angry if he did so. By the time Dojun started counting down from 10, the count had already reached 1. Kyeji emerged from around the corner. At first, Dojun thought Hunter was going to explain herself. But he was wrong. The girl remained silent. After a minute of silence, Dojun asked her why she had been following him. He also asked why she had been hiding. The girl felt embarrassed. She said she hadn't gotten an answer yet. She wanted to know if the manager was hiding his powers. However, Dojun instead offered her dinner because she had followed him all the way home. Kyeji immediately agreed because she was hungry. She quickly followed the manager. and thanked him. Suddenly, halfway down the stairs, she said, he said it made him uncomfortable to come home too late. He suggested that it would be best to just leave. Do-jun turned to look at him. He asked him to be patient a little longer. He said that everything was probably ready. The hunter was very surprised to hear this. He hadn't expected the manager to be living with someone else. However, Do-jun spoke in a calm tone. He said that his daughter was living with him. That surprised CYJ even more. Do-jun asked him not to say anything about his job because his daughter thought he was just an ordinary employee. Kaiji felt uncomfortable. He thought the manager had gotten married at a young age. Yuni heard her father come home and opened the door. She was very happy that Do-jun had finally come home. When he saw the manager's daughter, KYJ was surprised all over again. He hadn't expected the girl to be that tall. Do-jun was 26 years old. So why was a grown woman calling Do-jun dad? That's what Hunter wondered. Yuni's expression changed immediately when she saw her father bringing a guest home. She asked, "Who is that?" The manager replied that he was just a coworker. The girl looked at her coworker. She didn't quite believe he was just a coworker. Do-jun explained that they worked in the same department. She then asked, "Can they come in now?" Yuni immediately smiled and even became friendly, as if inviting them into the apartment. The apartment was sparkling clean. CJA was impressed by how clean it was. The girl said that she and her father were about to have dinner. She invited the guest to have some tea and then go home. When Do-jun mentioned that he had invited a coworker over for dinner, he also asked his daughter to prepare a meal for the guest. Yunhe's expression changed instantly. It was clear she was unhappy. The young man suggested it was just puberty. But the girl immediately shouted, "No." Keiji looked at Yunhe very intently. She seemed to be thinking about something. The girl's face looked very sad. Keiji felt sorry for her. He spotted a suitcase. The guest confirmed that he was a hunter. However, he was only an F-rank hunter. Chei realized that Yuni was interested. So he began telling her about the suitcase. He said that it had been made by Schwartz Lops. The hunter was so engrossed in his story that he didn't immediately realize he had said too much. When he turned around and saw Do-jun's displeased expression, he realized it was time to stop talking. So he apologized. Yun was surprised to learn that the girl was a hunter. He was also surprised to find out that her father was just an ordinary employee. However, Do-jun immediately explained. She said that Chaeji was a part-time hunter. He also emphasized that this must not be told to anyone. If she were found out, Chaeji would be fined. With a face full of enthusiasm, Yuni ran up to the guest. She clasped both of his hands. In a cheerful voice, she said that she, too, dreamed of becoming a hunter. Then she pulled out a document. She said she would be enrolling in the Hunter Academy soon. Chaeji was touched by the girl's words. She asked Yuni not to praise her too much. She said she was only an F-rank. However, Yuni didn't care. To her, the most important thing was that Chaeji had passed the hunter exam. The girl then asked what fighting style she used, close range or long range. She also asked about healers. Many questions came up. Kaiji checked the time. It was already quite late, so she hurried home. Yuni said goodbye to Hunter. She said it had been a fun evening. She also said she'd enjoyed it. The girl replied that she'd enjoyed it too. Then Kaiji said she'd stop by again next time, but Yuni just smiled. He asked Kahayeji not to come anymore. He said he didn't like Chaeji. Do-jun asked his daughter to go inside first. He intended to take Kahayeji to the station. Yuni smiled again. She said, "All right, come back soon, okay." But it was clear that Yuni's smile that day was just a mask. While Do-jun was taking Saeji to the station, he suddenly asked. He asked if Yuni wasn't his biological daughter. Do-jun found the question very strange. He asked why Saeji thought that. The girl gave many reasons. There was an age difference. Do-jun was 26, while Yuni was 17. Do-jun also didn't wear a wedding ring or have any family photos. Not only that, but Yuni's last name was Kanzial. That's why Kaiji realized that Yuni wasn't Do-jun's biological daughter. He also realized that Do-jun had never been married. Do-jun became very confused, especially when the hunter asked about his relationship with Yunhee. Kaiji kept asking questions. He asked, "Is there a dangerous relationship between them?" Do-jun replied that there was nothing going on. He had no choice but to say that Yunhee was his niece, who had told him that her sister was having problems. That was why he had raised Uni. The girl was a little embarrassed. She even felt guilty for prying too much into personal matters. She apologized for asking too many questions. Dojun asked her not to bring it up at the office, just to be on the safe side. When the manager walked her to the station, she thanked him for the evening. They parted ways. Chae stared at him for quite a while. Suddenly, a thought occurred to her. What was Seal's last name? She tried to understand how that could have happened. But even though it was fascinating and confusing, it was already late, and it was time to go home. The next day at City Hall, Dojun submitted his report to management. The department head was surprised to see how he had managed to finish it in just one day. Dojun asked if there was a problem with the report. However, that wasn't the issue. The problem was that the report was flawless. The department head couldn't believe that Dojun had put it together on his own. After all, it usually took at least a few months to compile data like that. The department head asked Kwon Huk-soo if he had helped Dojun, but the man said he was just as surprised. He praised his coworker. He added that now he had to catch up. Dojun was very happy to hear that. The praise made him a little shy. Suddenly, CJI appeared out of nowhere. She said that the manager might be a very good worker. Dojun didn't understand why the girl had come that day. Chae said she had just stopped by because she was passing through. For some reason, Dojun became very upset. She said that, as requested, she would still receive the same payment. After saying that, Chae took an envelope out of her bag. She handed it to the manager. Dojun took the envelope. He began to read its contents. Kanan Hukusu said that it was the schedule for the hunter qualification exam. Since the Dojun now has a hunter under his leadership, he needs to know about this. The hunter level assessment is an exam that all hunters take once a year. Based on the results of this assessment, a hunter's level can go up or down. Therefore, that day is very important for a hunter. Dojun realized that this was a skills assessment. In South Korea alone, there are several hundred guilds. Each one is constantly on the lookout for high-level hunters. It is during this period that transfers between guilds occur most frequently. Kwon Huk-soo said that was why the exam day was referred to as the opening day of the guild transfer market. The boss was very concerned about this. Dojun realized that the boss was afraid that Hunter Kahyeji would move guilds if her level increased. After all, Hunter Kahyeji also had to take the certification. Therefore, Kwon Huk-soo suggested that Dojun accompany her. The girl was scheduled to appear in a week. This would be her first test. Dojun asked, "Will CJI move to another guild if her level increases?" However, Karyeji said that she wanted her contract extended in this guild. The manager said that wasn't his responsibility. He suggested that CJI raise her level before certification day. That way, it would be easier for her to receive assignments. He could also raise her salary. However, the girl replied sadly, saying that she would remain at F rank because she couldn't use mana. Hunter certification is divided into several stages: level determination, statistical assessment, and practical assessment. The final result is determined by the total score. However, the most important aspect is mana. Hunters can become physically stronger with the help of mana crystals. This is called mana injection. However, Chae couldn't achieve this either. Dojun thought about it. He knew she couldn't hope to rise above E rank. He suggested she keep trying, because if she didn't, she'd never know. But Kayeji responded in a frustrated voice, saying she was destined to live as an F rank. The manager explained that she had to live with F rank because there was only one hunter under her supervision. Chaeji's rank is related to the level of rift Dojun can explore. Chae feels saddened, realizing that if Dojun finds another hunter, he'll be able to advance further. Dojun responds sarcastically, saying that posting an ad for another hunter is a good idea. But it's actually just a joke. Chae was his only hunter, so he asked her to follow him. The girl quietly followed Dojun. He led her to the hunter training room. As they entered, she asked what it was. The manager explained that it used to be an office. Now, it has been renovated into a training hall. Dojun honestly admitted that this was his first time here. The manager said the training room had been rebuilt using special materials from the Hunter Bureau. He added that the walls were impact-resistant. Dojun stopped and looked at Saiji. She said something about a lack of mana. He asked if the hunter had ever tried strengthening his body. Kayeji replied that she had. However, she couldn't gain mana until she reached level 3. The girl immediately burst into tears. She felt like a complete failure. The manager asked her to demonstrate her swordsmanship skill. Keiji immediately showed her notebook. She searched for some notes. After finding them, she handed them to Dojun. There were many notes there. The girl explained that she had simply written them down. However, she didn't fully understand their meaning. The universe was created from 3 entities: heaven, earth, and humanity. At the end of the note, the manager looked at the technique sketch. Chei apologized for the poor drawing. However, Dojun realized that it was likely a 3 entities sword art technique. Swordsmanship is a technique developed from the 3 entities sword art technique. It was clear to Dojun. He called it swordsmanship. After leaving behind his advice and teachings on the technique, he simply disappeared. After understanding everything and finishing his story, Dojun turned to Chei with a voice filled with joy. He placed both hands on her shoulders. He remarked that no one could be as fortunate as her. Keiji ran after him. She said goodbye to all her coworkers. The department head suspected something was going on between Dojun and Seiji. For several days in a row, they had disappeared at exactly 1 a.m. Kwan Hatsuksu confirmed that there was at least something on the girl's side. The 2 men realized that only a fool wouldn't notice that there was something going on between them. However, according to the section chief, the Dojun didn't seem to suspect anything. In fact, the 2 were simply training regularly. Chei trained with great skill, improving her swish skills every day, every minute. The hunter was getting stronger. Suddenly, during training, the girl felt something. He assumed it was mana. Therefore, Cheiji immediately checked his status window. Hunter had reached level 4, with his S-rank swordsmanship skill at phase 3. Achieving such results in just 1 week was extraordinary. Both of them were beyond joy. Chei-yu was deeply moved by this achievement. She said that meeting the manager was a great stroke of luck. Dojun was proud. He said he would consider it when renewing his contract. The girl was happy, but also a little embarrassed because she knew. She knew that the seemingly ordinary manager was anything but ordinary. He was actually hiding his strength. However, Dojun didn't answer the question. He ignored it again. Dojun turned around. He said they would meet again tomorrow at the Hunter office. Now he was going home. The next day, a lot of people gathered at the Hunter office. Dojun asked Cha-Yeji if this was her first time taking the certification. Cha-Yeji said that this was her first time taking the Hunter exam. However, he had never done it again. He had trained very hard. The Dojun knew the results would be good. So he wished him luck. The crowd suddenly erupted in cheers. They announced that the legendary star Kong Min-hook himself had arrived with a hero by his side. Han Minji had also arrived. The scene was captivating. The important S-rank figures arrived together. Everyone present made way for the stars to walk calmly down the red carpet. Dojun asked his hunter who they were. The girl was very surprised because Dojun didn't recognize them. He revealed that they were the 7th and 10th ranked hunters of the Icarus Guild. They were some of the strongest hunters in the world. Dojun stared at the 2 legendary hunters. He pondered. He realized that there was nothing special about them in just 1 year. If you work hard enough, you can catch up to them. Some people around them said Dojun was crazy, thinking it was possible to become a higher S-rank. Chei asked him to never say that out loud again. She felt ashamed of the Dojun. Kong Min-hook was annoyed. He didn't understand why they had to deal with each other here. However, Han Minji asked him to behave himself since there were cameras around. He added that this place was more interesting than going out hunting and getting dirty with monster blood. Han Minji continued to smile. He had heard that a genius was supposed to appear this time. However, the hero felt it was impossible, as he had heard similar stories for years. However, the heroine remained firm in her stance. They couldn't let another guild snatch up such a talented hunter. With that, she hurried off. If they were late, they might not get a seat. A familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was the same hunter, Han-jung, the one Do-jun had once frightened. He announced that he was the one they had been waiting for. However, his friends laughed. They asked if he had brought spare pants. Then, elsewhere, the host called for attention. He announced that the statistics count would begin soon. He asked all the hunters to enter in order. Do-jun said they should go because this was the beginning of what he and Chaji had come here for. Han-jung, despite everything, considered himself the strongest. He wanted to join the heroes of the Icarus Guild. All the hunters who had come to the assessment today were waiting for a miracle and believed in their own strength. The essence of this analysis is that each hunter approaches the machine one by one. The machine reads their information. The first hunter is lucky. He's overjoyed to have achieved a C rank. Several men immediately approach him. They are Go Kildong, the representative of the Vulcan Guild, and Jo Hyunjin, the representative of the Buffalo Guild. The managers began persuading the hunter to join their guild. They claimed their guild was composed primarily of C-rank hunters. They provided all the necessary weapons and costumes for new members above D rank. The second guild offered double the deposit. People crowded around the man so tightly that it was impossible to get through. Finally, CYJ managed to break through the crowd. She approached Do-jun. Do-jun asked if her hunter passed the test. The girl took a breath. With a smile on her face, she replied that she did. She managed to get a rank of Strength 6, Dexterity 11, Health 8, and Mana 10. When Kaieji said that, she glowed with happiness. As his mana increased rapidly, Do-jun congratulated his student. He asked, will they continue? The hunter naturally agreed. They continued. To watch the other hunters battle. The girl was very enthusiastic about watching. She thought the difficulty level was just right for Rengsi. The manager tells his hunters to get ready because it's their turn after this. Chaeji nervously asks if she can really try Rengsi. Do-jun calmly answers, saying that Chaeji can handle C-rank monsters now. He's flattered that the manager thinks so highly of her. However, he doesn't understand how Do-jun can be so confident. Do-jun asked Chaeji to trust him. At that hour, an announcement came over the loudspeaker that access to the rift would soon be open to the third group. He believed in her and in her powers, perhaps even more than he did in himself. Once in the arena, the girl felt nervous because so many people were watching her. She grew even more nervous and afraid when she heard a familiar voice from behind her. It was Han-jung, who was shocked and asked what Hunter was doing here. Chaeyi stared at him, speechless, as if her tongue had been swallowed. Han-jung asked if she was trying to test her strength and said she was crazy if so. Suddenly, the hunter burst into tears, feeling frustrated and unsure of what to do. The man was confused and said that this was the first time he had seen an F-rank hunter try to fight at this level. All the other hunters were furious to hear that such a low-rank hunter had appeared here. Han-jung was speechless. He didn't understand what Chaeji was expecting. The man's face changed drastically upon hearing this, and he feared Do-jun like fire. He then looked around to see if the terrifying figure was around. However, Do-jun was not far away, watching him and his foster child. Suddenly, Kang Min-hook entered the observation room. He said that Chaeyi was a contract hunter at the mayor's office and Do-jun was in charge. The young man confirmed this. Hiro found it odd that Do-jun didn't seem surprised at all. Then he decided to get straight to the point, as he hadn't come here without a reason. Kang Min-hook wants to invite Saiji to his guild. He explains that Saiji has never done physical strengthening before, and that it was his first time being certified using an F-rank crystal. With that crystal, he can increase his mana by 10 points at once. Kang Min-hook considered Saiji's talent terrifying, as there was no record of him ever having undergone any body strengthening afterward, which seemed absurd. Dojan listened intently to his opponent and felt that this was far from just an introduction. At the Icarus Guild, Kong Minuk promised to give him wings and provide in a rank suit so he could learn from his seniors' knowledge and experience and participate in the most difficult rift raids to gain real combat experience. Kong Minuk looked at Dojan and asked mockingly what he could offer besides a raise. The young man lowered his head because the hero was mostly telling the truth and there was nothing to argue with. Kong Minuk was annoyed that the mentor had sent his student to a C-rank rift without any experience above D rank. He was certain this level was impossible for the girl and asked what Dojan was really thinking. At that moment, a C-rank rift was activated, and the task was to defeat the orcs within a certain time limit. The orcs were numerous and extremely well-armed, unlike the goblins Chai-Eiji had faced before. Han-Jung was thrilled that the rift had finally opened and she could show off her full potential. Chai-Yu was also ready. She gripped her sword tighter and waited. Only a hunter can raise another hunter, Kong Minuk had said. If she wanted to learn how to survive, she would have to join the Icarus Guild. The man said that if Dojan cared about his produce, he should have let him go. Dojan thought for a moment and then replied that he wasn't an object to begin with and that he couldn't control himself or his destiny. With a smile, Dojan suggested that Kong Minuk make a bet. It was completely unexpected, and the man didn't understand what the city hall official was trying to achieve. The orcs began to approach, and all the hunters waited for the right moment to attack. Han-Jung intended to taunt Saiji by telling her to calm down. But even as he told her that, he also thought his decision to take C-rank was a mistake. The orc was right in front of him. Its massive body swung its club at the man. Han-Jung tried to dodge, but the orc was stronger and managed to hit him, forcing the man to block the attack. He didn't understand how orcs could be this strong. This should just be a test. Withstanding one attack after another, Han-Jung had no chance to attack back. His strength started to run out and he said he couldn't take it anymore. Immediately afterward, her face was struck by an orc. Han-Jung lost her hammer during the attack and was terrified, unable to defend herself without it. The orc raised his mace and swung it at the man, as if to finish him off. Kaiji saw this and immediately rushed to her friend's aid. The orc threw the girl away with the first blow, but he didn't give up. He stood up and told Han-Jung to step aside, then declared that he would face the monster himself. The man was stunned by this statement from the seemingly unpromising hunter. Kaiji felt a surge of strength as she realized it was her turn to attack. He watched the orc closely and felt like he could see its path. That only meant he was capable of it because he had trained hard and understood how the principle worked. The hunter moved quickly and agilely, and he knew not to stand still. He leapt high and almost seemed to fly past the orc. For some reason, he was reminded of his training. The first move of the Heaven Sword style. In an instant, the girl was behind her opponent, and Chai-Eiji launched a controlling attack with her sword, feeling a sense of almighty power. The move captured the attention of all the spectators and hunters. Han-Jung was shocked and unable to think or speak after witnessing the scene. Was Dojan the only one who knew this would happen and that his protege was capable of so much more? Kong Minuk was also shocked, having thought such a thing impossible. Dojan smiled and told him not to be surprised, as there was nothing surprising about what happened. He explained to Minhuk that there are 3 ways to use mana. The first is to infuse mana into a weapon called a shik. The second is to release mana, which is called cool. The third is to make a replacement, which is called yom. Putting mana into a weapon is not difficult. The most important thing is to control the process. Kong Minuk was amazed at how easily CJI used the technique in battle. Time ran out, and the exam ended. Meanwhile, all hunters had to leave the exam room. When the scoreboard appeared, Han-Jung was shocked and couldn't understand how this could have happened. He was in last place without killing a single orc. Meanwhile, Saiji ranked first after killing 8 orcs. She was so happy that she immediately ran to her manager to share her feelings and happiness. She succeeded and thanked Dojun profusely. Dojun replied that it was all thanks to her hard training. Before she could reach her teacher, she was blocked by Kong Minyuk, who praised Saiji and called her fight worthy of recognition. The girl felt embarrassed, as it seemed trivial to an S-rank hunter like her. She was surprised at how skillfully Saiji used his techniques and asked if he had a teacher. However, Dojun interrupted, saying that Chaji was self-taught. She hadn't expected Dojun to say that, but she was confused and realized she had to go with the flow. So when Kong Minyuk asked if it was true, she answered as if it were true. Now Kong Minyuk's face became very serious, and he decided to get straight to the point. He told Chei that he wanted to recruit her into the Icarus Guild. Kong Minyuk added that if Chei agreed, the guild would provide her with everything she needed and wanted. The hunter was very grateful for the offer, but replied that he wouldn't join their guild. He then looked at Dojun and asked for his opinion, and he seemed to agree. Kong Minenhek became angry and told him to reconsider, as opportunities like this don't come around every day. He emphasized that Saiji could earn a much higher salary than at the mayor's office and advance further. However, she stood by her decision and replied that she liked her current situation. As she announced her departure and headed for the door, Kong Minyuk fell silent. Dojun stopped in front of the door, turned around, and asked the man to remember to call him. At first, Kong Minyuk didn't understand why he had to call an employee. But then he quickly remembered the bet. Dojun had bet that Miss Chei would kill more than 5 orcs. If Dojun lost, he promised to persuade the hunter to join the Icarus Guild.